All right, another podcast from the Michigan Institute of Athletics in Brighton, Michigan. This is going to be an awesome podcast today. I'm sitting with Jaime Matthews. Her son is actually an MMA fighter, reached out to me on Facebook and was saying, I've listened to some of your podcasts, James, and my mom's story really parallels a lot of the concepts that you often talk about. She's a leader in her community. She's trying to help people change their lives. She's gone through a tremendous amount of difficulty, and I really think if you guys sat down and had a conversation, it would be killer. And that's all it took.
Wow.
I reached back out and I said, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to sit down with your mom and be able to discuss, what she's found in life, the things she's gone through. And here we are, Jaime. So I'm going to pass the mic over to you and just say, however you'd like to start the episode is fine. But what I generally tell the guests is take me all the way back to when you were younger, kind of who you were in the world, what you thought you were going to be, maybe the light switch moments in your life, the things that really shaped you as a young woman, and how your story unfolded. And then we'll just let it go, as authentically as we can.
You got it. Well, thank you very much for having me here today, James. I super appreciate the opportunity. And when my son Hunter called me and said, hey, I want you to be on this podcast, and he sent me what he had said to you, and talk about a proud mom moment. I raised my 3 children mostly as a single mom. And of course, I'm not a perfect mom, so I've made my mistakes, and to see his level of pride for his mom just melted me. And so that was wonderful, and I'm really glad to be here. But so where do I start? As a young kid, I had a pretty good childhood. I did come from parents that were divorced, so a broken home. I mainly lived with my father, and he was an alcoholic. So I want to say the first thing that really impacted me trauma-wise was I had just gotten a puppy. I wanted a dog my entire life. I was in 7th grade. He finally got us a puppy, and 2 days after having the puppy, I get a phone call that my dad had just hit a road construction truck at 80 miles an hour, passed out drunk. So that completely erupted my entire life and everything I knew about my life, and I ended up moving with my mom.
Did the puppy die in that incident? Is
He
that the
didn't.
dog part?
Nope, he didn't die, but my mom couldn't have a dog. So her husband was allergic to dogs, so I had to let go of the dog. So my dad was hospitalized for a year after that because he was very broken. You can imagine the road construction truck was at a dead stop. So that just kind of erupted everything. My mom and my dad were completely 2 different people. My dad was very nonchalant, let me do whatever we wanted. My mom was very much all about rules and integrity, and so it was a major shift for me.
And how old were you at this point?
I was in 7th grade, so maybe 13 years old. So
and what was it like seeing your father in a state like that? I mean, that's your dad that you had been living with, you're growing up with. He goes through this catastrophic accident. You're having to live in a new home, but now all of a sudden your father, his life is probably taken from him in so many ways. What in the world was that like as a kid?
Well, I'll never forget, because my mom actually got the phone call from the hospital and said, your husband has been in a bad accident. She's like, that's not my husband. It is the father of my children. And they said, well, we don't expect him to live for 48 hours. So my mom took my brother and I up to the hospital to say our goodbyes. And all I can really remember is his arm up, his legs were leveled up, and when he tried to open his eyes, it was all glass in his eye, and I'll never forget that. So I was very traumatized. He was unrecognizable, really. But even though my mom and my dad had this horrible divorce, my dad was not a good person to my mom. She took my brother and I up there every few days to go visit my dad. She, for a whole year. And I remember somebody asked her, why would you do that? He was so terrible to you. And she said, I didn't care if that son of a bitch died up there, but I didn't want my children to lose their father. And I live by that, because I ended up going through a divorce myself. That was not pretty. But I always remembered what a difference that made in my life, that my mom put her ill will for my father aside for her children. And so she definitely gave me something to look up to when she did that.
That is pretty incredible. I mean, there's a lot of very spiteful, angry, and maybe even justifiably for why they were hurt, but a lot of people that, everything is to bastardize the other person and make them out to be, just a demon in their life. And what were your thoughts during that time? So you're going through that. You're with your mom now, but you're constantly having to go and visit your father in the hospital. What were you experiencing, thinking? What was it like for you?
I don't really know. All I do know is I wanted to be back at my dad's. I just, as soon as he got better, I wanted to go back. And I think it was just because of the difference, of their parenting. And I was so used to my dad, and I was kind of a daddy's girl. Whereas my brother, he liked my mom's environment more because there was rules, there was structure, there was, I love yous and helping with homework, and it was normal.
So you had a very good relationship with your father. It's just the environment wasn't that productive for a good kid, probably.
Right. Well, I just got away with everything, so of course I liked it as a teenage girl, so I just remember wanting to go back. And as soon as he got home, released from the hospital, I mean, he was still in a wheelchair, and I went and lived with him, and I literally took care of him. And it was like, my mom would say, you're more like a wife than a child. It really upset her because when I turned 16, I did all the grocery shopping. I would go and pay the bills. I would drive to Consumers Energy and pay the bill. And
did you like doing that stuff?
I liked that at the time. I liked it because what I got from it was freedom. Freedom to go hang out with my friends. It'd be like, Dad, I want to go to the fair. And he'd be like, here's $100. Anything to get me out of his hair. Right? So as long as I had dinner cooked for him and the house was clean, I could go do really whatever I wanted. I could say, I'm going to my friends for the weekend, and we're going to go camping with our parents and literally, just hang out and get in trouble and do things I wasn't supposed to be doing because there was just no structure there.
Reflecting back, and as a parent now yourself, why do you think you had that drive as a teenager you probably knew you were doing the wrong things?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But you didn't have someone, holding you accountable. Why do you think it is that you were going that path while your brother was going, no, I'm going to I know that there's more rules here and I know that there's more of this, but I'm going to, stay in this environment because I think it's better for whatever reasons. Why do you think you had the drive?
Honestly, I think I was just lost. That I didn't know who I was. I wasn't the popular kid. I wasn't the burnout kid. I just existed, and so I wanted to be where the parties were, or I wanted to be the one that, my dad gave me a convertible when I was 16 years old, so everyone wanted to ride my convertible, and, usually I'd have money to take everyone to the mall kind of thing. So I think it gave me the freedom to make friends and look like the cool kid, but deep down I didn't feel like the cool kid, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes sense. This gave you a layer of identity. You had something that you got to be proud of.
Sure.
It's like, hey, I have the freedom. I can go where I want.
No curfew, I was the cool kid with that. Yeah.
But do you think, as we unfold your story, that probably kind of led you towards more destruction in your life for not having the boundaries and the rules?
Absolutely. And it wasn't until I was 18, graduated from high school, and it was the first time I ever got real with myself when it came to my relationship with my mom and my dad and stuff, was that the price of that environment was my dad barely ever said, I love you. He never said, how was your day? He never came to my cheerleading competitions or anything like that. He was emotionally unavailable my entire life. And I wanted him just to be proud of me and to love me. And I feel like I was just missing that so much, to where my mom was the opposite. She was, she wasn't a helicopter parent, but she directed me and gave me guidance and helped me and loved me and, taught me everything. But when you're a teenage, a girl, you don't want those life lessons. You just want to have fun.
That's wild. That's wild to think about and consider that, the things that you actually wanted or that would have been good for you, you were running from and avoiding. And yet your father, let's say he gave you those things, but then he took all your freedoms from you and said, no, you're not going out on your own. You're not having no, you have a curfew. You're not doing this. I'll come to your cheerleading game, but you're not. Then all of a sudden you might have resented him during that whole period. It's
absolutely
wild how.
Would have resented him. Absolutely would have.
It's a very good lesson for people that listen to this, that like your children don't know what's best for them.
Exactly.
You can't let them decide. There's a lot of parenting now where like people are trying to be friends with their kids. They're trying to be friends. Oh, you know what? Wouldn't that be cool if you could just do whatever you want? Okay, all right, that's fine. That's not fine because it leads to destruction later on. A lot of the times if you do what the child or your loved one or whatever it is, we're going to get into a lot of this in your story. If you do what they want in the short term, you are sacrificing them in the long term. Sure. And it's just a brutal reality to have to accept because you just want your kid to be happy, right?
Sure.
But it's like happy now or happy long term. Those are different strategies. Your mom was playing the long term strategy. Your father was playing the like, hey, she can go out and do whatever she wants. And the funny thing is, it sounds like you have more love for your mother now and more resentment for your father, even though in the time he was giving you all the things that you said you wanted.
Exactly. Yes.
That's incredibly important lesson.
It is very important. And what's funny is, I was a single mom of 3 kids, and Hunter, the one that wrote you, he's 6'3", MMA fighter. And if you ask Hunter to this day, what scares you the most? And he'll say, my mother, because I was that tough parent. And I raised my children like my mom tried to raise me. So it was just crazy because I guess the amount of respect I had for her, and I could see when I had children, like the value in what she was trying to do.
So let's unfold your story a little bit. So you're the teenager that's, chose to go back with your dad. You're kind of playing a parenting role where you're taking care of him, but you have your freedoms. You have the ability to make any choice you want in life, which is such a dangerous, slippery slope because you don't know about life yet. You don't have the ability to see through the illusions and know how dangerous drugs and the wrong crowds can be. So it's like, yeah, you were just given an open map to go explore, but nobody kind of laid the foundations. Mom might have been trying,
right,
but at a distance. So how did that end up? What roads did that lead you down? What lessons did you stumble upon? What were the light switch moments where you were like, wait, this isn't it. This isn't working out. This is a problem. Like, start to unfold your story that way.
Well, sadly, that didn't come for many, many, many years later. So I ended up marrying my high school sweetheart. And so what I knew was taking care of a man, right? So I was ready for that. So I never gave myself the opportunity or the time to explore life. So right out of high school, I married my husband, and we started having children. So I had Hunter when I was 19. So I didn't go off to college. My whole life growing up, I always said I'd get into law, being a lawyer. But what was normal for me and what was my comfort zone was being a caretaker. And so I ended up having Hunter when I was 19, and then I had 2 other children after that. So for the next, I was married for 10 years. I did exactly that. I was a stay-at-home mom. I cooked, I cleaned. He started a heating and cooling company, and I taught myself how to do the books. Like, we got QuickBooks, I did payroll, and if I sit down and put my mind to anything, I will achieve it. I do know that about myself. And somehow, I get honed in, and I'm either all in or all out. And I was a great stay-at-home mom. I did that typical PTA parent thing.
So you've got 3 little kids. You and your husband are running a business together. Mm-hmm. You're taking care of the household. He's out grinding to try to build the company. I mean, that sounds a little bit like the American dream. You've got the family. Was it good for a while, and then it began to go downhill? Did your relationship fall apart? Like, when you reflect back from the outside, there's no reason we couldn't know that 20 years could pass by and you say, and I raised all my kids. They went off to college. We did this, that. Our heating and cooling business is super successful, or it could be absolute destruction on the other side. But it sounds like you weren't in that bad of a spot from the childhood that you had, from the things that you had to deal with. You weren't in that bad of a spot. You and your husband are trying to run a company. You've got your little kids. And in today's age, stay-at-home mom might even be a privilege because things are so expensive and so brutal. Like, so many people that I know, they're like, there's no way one of us can stay home. Like, for us to even try to have a home, both people have to work and contribute. Society's really changed. Sure. So I hear that part of your story. you're learning the books, you're figuring out how to run like the front end operations of the business. That's awesome. And then how does that drag you two apart? Does that cause damage within? Are there outside factors that ruin it?
So one of the light bulb moments is when I was pregnant with our second child, he got my really good friend pregnant. So we were both carrying his child. So that was where my life started to split off and not look so great. So the thing,
things were pretty good up until that point.
Things were pretty good, yeah.
You had Hunter, your
Carrie and Travis. Yep, she sat on the end of my hospital bed right after I gave birth, and unbeknownst to me, she was pregnant.
That is unbelievable. So that's a first massive shock. Your world gets shattered.
Yeah, I was absolutely shattered. We were just young. We were broke. We were, I'll never forget. I, came home. I had a C-section. I had a 3-year-old and then a newborn, and we had no power because we were broke. And I remember talking to my dad on the phone until the sun was coming up with one of those little lanterns that were lit up by oil, and I knocked the top of it off and glass went everywhere, but I couldn't see because I had no electricity. So it was tough. It just, as part of, starting off a family young and just not knowing what you're doing. We were broke. We took the hard road for sure. But at that time, I really wanted my family to work out. And, we ended up rekindling, and I was the type of person that if I'm going to take you back, then I never held it against him. He unfortunately, the girl he got pregnant was also married at the time, and they took off to Pennsylvania. So my husband never got to see his child for the first couple of years. And I bought Christmas, like every year I'd buy an ornament as if he was there. We put up a stocking because I felt like he was a good dad, and I couldn't imagine what it was like to have a child out there you didn't get to know. And so I tried to support that, but I think just so much damage was done. I felt like he got controlling. I think part of it was him being controlling, part of it was me just being done. And I needed something else. I needed a better life, and I don't know that I ever actually got over the pain that came with that. It was very traumatizing for me. Your emotions and your hormones after having a child are already out of whack. And then I actually got one of those phone calls. I know you, but you don't know me. Did you know your husband's having an affair? And I'm like, no. Well, did you know she was pregnant? That's how I found out. So ultimately, 5 years after that, so we'd ended up staying together, and I had my daughter, Hope. And then when she was about 1.5 years old, I'd finally called it and started the world of being a single mom with 3 small children.
And you got custody of your kids, so you moved out. So that is an incredibly difficult road. A lot of people get trapped in a situation like that, and they go, I have 3 kids. I don't have a source of income. I have no idea what I'm going to do. And they kind of suffer in silence, and their kids just grow up with a broken mother. They grow up watching their mother just completely candle flame put out, floats through until hopefully the kids are old enough, and then the mom can try to recreate whatever life that she can try to build at that point. But you decided, no, I'm going to cut this off now. I'm going to take my 3 kids. That is an incredible moment, and that probably had to require so much strength and so much belief that it could be better. Just take us through that if you could. So how old is Hope at the time? How old are the other kids? What did you decide to do for where are you going to live? What is your occupation going to be, et cetera?
Yeah.
You had mentioned to me before the podcast that that alcohol had gotten you for a period of time. Is it during this period? Were you drinking when the kids were in the house, or you didn't even start till after?
I didn't even start till after. So once I got my divorce, then I was really lost. It didn't get better. I thought, I would have, freedom and a great life and stuff. And, unfortunately, I just took down I went down the common road of dating very abusive men. And one that I started to date was he was very much an alcoholic. And that's when I started drinking. It's just being around the drinking. My husband before, we barely ever drank. But he got very physically abusive toward me mentally.
The newer man.
Yes, yep. And so my kids had to go through that. And, Hope was only, like I said, a year and a half old when I got a divorce. She started watching her mom get beat when she was about 4 years old. And Hunter was probably like 6th grade. So still very, very young, impressionable age. So that's when I picked up drinking. I did it as a survival tactic, I guess, because when he would get drunk, it was the only thing, like when I was drinking, it gave me that sense of power. But it only made things worse. So, but I did, with the boys, they did basketball, football, they were in all the sports. Drinking never interrupted. So I thought, this is the lies I would tell myself, okay? That I went to every basketball game, football game, baseball game, even the practices. I was the PTA, I held a full-time job. So I felt like I was doing right by my children, but looking back, I wasn't. They, first of all, were watching me go from one toxic relationship to the next. I felt like I fell into that rut because going back to my dad and just never knowing, like never being truly loved in a healthy way by a man, that if anyone tried, it would be very uncomfortable for me. So, and the first guy that was like, going to show me a great life, I got suckered right in every single time. But so yeah, it was a difficult path, and the kids.
And so you would actually say that second man, in a lot of ways, might have even been worse than what you were trying to get away from.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like with the kids' dad, we had, he was a great father, and he was a great provider. He owned a business. He ran a business.
But you said at one point you had no electricity in the house. What?
Because we were just broke. We just, he was going from trying to find his way. He was very young. He was working.
I understand. So he was trying his best. It's just sometimes it wasn't enough.
Right. And then it was just, he never physically abused me or anything. I just think there was just a lot of pain.
No, I understand.
After that.
100%. And so, but then my question is, like, you get to this second man who is far below even what you had experienced before. Now there's a bunch of alcohol in the picture. Now there's all this stuff. You already had the courage to step away from the first relationship and say, okay, my kids and me deserve something better. What kept you trapped in the other situation for so long, and how long? And then what broke you free of that? What was the light switch to say, like, this isn't it? What am I doing? This isn't it.
Well, my brother at the time, actually, one time I got assaulted really bad and was hospitalized. And I remember calling my best friend, and I was too afraid to even call the cops. And so she called them. The next thing I know, they showed up. And
good on her.
Good on her, yeah. I was just so lost. And my brother said I had 1 week. He found out about it. And, well, actually, my mom called and said, well, I hope your stuff's packed because your brother's on I-75 and he's coming to get you. And so my family really gave me no option. I didn't leave right then. Sadly, I paid for him to go to anger management because, we all think we're going to be able to fix somebody. I want to care for him. I want to take care of him. He quit his job as soon as I moved into his home. He quit his job, so I was like the only one paying the bills. And you just feel trapped. You feel like there's no way out. But luckily, my brother and the support of my family and stuff, I ended up getting out of that situation. And, just one thing after another. The one thing, I came down here. I moved back down closer to my family. I got an amazing job. But
doing what?
I worked for an industrial contracting company. And I started off as a project management assistant. And then I grew from there. I worked there for 13 years. So it got me away from that small town where I was. But as I was trying to find what was best for me and where I could make money for my children and stuff, ultimately I was hurting my children because I was taking them away from their friends and their family and their sports. And I don't realize that at the time. But I'm negatively impacting their life. And on top of that, I'm drinking a lot. And but what really stopped it was Hunter was Hunter's, his senior year, he'd had enough. He wanted to be up by his dad where he could hunt and he could fish and not deal with mom's drama and, the life that I was putting them through. And so he left and went to live with his dad. So that left us with Travis and Hope. And the next thing you know, Travis, he wants to go because his brother's up there. Those two are always been so, so close. And then it was just Hope and I. And that's when my world, she was...
Can you take me back to that? Like, I'm picturing that right now. A mother who's gone through all these different things, all these different difficulties, all these stresses. You've tried to escape one situation. You're battling with alcohol. You've got all these problems. You have your own trauma that's pouring onto your kids. And now both of your oldest boys leave. That has got to be one of the darkest moments of your life.
It was absolutely devastating. I was so devastated because I always prided myself in being a good mom because I was there for them. Like I said, it was the false lies I was telling myself because I was always there for practice. I never drank at their games, none of that. But yet the lifestyle I was living with toxic relationships, drinking is, the biggest thing that I learned, especially later, and I can get into that story with my daughter, is she ended up going down a similar path. And when I got sober and I was trying to make amends, she could not forgive me. She was so angry with me. And what I realized was my boys were much older, like high school and stuff, junior high school, when I started drinking. So they got that PTA mom. They got that stay-at-home, loving, tuck you in, read you books kind of mom. But when I started drinking, what I lost was the ability to teach my daughter how to love herself because I didn't even know how to love myself. So I couldn't teach her that. And to be able to come to terms with that, I don't blame myself for some of the trauma that my daughter went through, but I also know that I had a part in it because I never taught her those really important lessons that a mother should teach a daughter. But looking back, my dad also didn't teach me. I never knew how to love myself other than taking care of a man. That's what gave me purpose.
So how old was Hope when both brothers move out and then it's just her and you? Like, how old was she during that period?
She was about 12 years old. And so then she started getting very, she was acting out. She was cutting herself. She was playing havoc on my life. She just was, I would get a call like 3 times a week from, at work from her school saying that she was threatening to kill herself, and I had to go get her. I took her to, I don't know how many programs trying to get her help. There was times where I was driving and she's trying to jump out of my moving vehicle, and she had so much anger, and I just couldn't understand where all this anger was coming from.
Do you understand it now?
I do now. So at that same time as I got pulled over and I got a DUI, and I always say I was one and done. That was the last thing that embarrassed me and humiliated me so badly that, there's things I did that were dumb and embarrassing and brought shame. And anytime I looked at that, it was always because I was drinking. And when I got that DUI, I was done. I literally signed up myself for rehab because I just was so tired. I was just tired, and I was not being my full potential, and I knew that. I really knew that because I've always been a very loving, good person, fun to be around, and I just was ruining myself, my image, my reputation, everything with drinking, but most importantly, how I was showing up as a mother. And so when I got sober, what happened with Hope, she's the only one home. She's there when I got sober. In fact, when I got released from rehab, she was graduating from 6th grade, and I showed up the day of graduation. She didn't know I was going to be there, but it was the day I got out of rehab. So she was just so thrilled. But here now is a mom that was all of a sudden going to show up and try to play mom, and she resented that so bad, and she wanted to act out and really like, you haven't you haven't been a mom so far, so what makes you think you're going to be a mom now? And she said that. Her and I used to do, seminars and stuff talking about our stories, because we both have traumatic but empowering stories and how we could change our life around. And she just said that she felt when someone asked what was it like to be raised by an alcoholic, she said, well, I was the mother and she was the child. And she was very blunt about it, and she wasn't wrong.
Yeah, that's incredible. And you know what's crazy? That's you with your father.
Mm-hmm.
Is you were the one that was doing the responsibilities and handling things, and you were avoiding your mother because she would have set boundaries and standards and everything. And yet your daughter just wanted that. She just wanted you to be her mother.
Right.
It's wild how life can parallel like that.
Yeah, you just gave me the goosebumps, because it's so true when you look back.
It's exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm.
What you avoided at all cost is what your daughter needed the most.
Yes.
Absolutely. It's
Absolutely.
remarkable. And it's like life teaches you perspectives over a long period of time, and they're usually baked with so much pain surrounding them and trauma and, and like perspectives you don't want to see. But when you learn to see them, that's when you really start to put yourself together or be able to help others, because you go, oh my God.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Well, I think, Hunter, when he got a little bit older and stuff, he had said to me one time, he's like, Mom, I was thinking about it, and I think the reason why you drank is because you were so lost and you were just trying to find yourself. And there was so much truth to that I was raising my kids scared out of my mind. I never had a real job. I mean, my husband was my resume, right? He's the only one, it's the only job I had was for my ex-husband. And, I worked at Coney Islands and couldn't afford a babysitter. So I had 3 small children sitting there filling up salt and pepper shakers so we could close and I could get them home. And it was just, I never truly knew who I was or what I didn't feel good at anything. But I was grateful as he got older, he could understand it. But another lie I would tell myself is I felt so controlled. And when I could drink, it was the one thing I could control. And drinking when the kids would be upset with me, I'd say, you know what? I'm an adult. I can do what I want. You're my children. You can't tell me what to do. And that was my mindset. It was like I didn't want people to tell me what I should or should not be doing anymore. And in that process, I lost their love, I lost their respect, and I lost them ultimately, all of them, because then Hope ended up, she was cutting herself so bad. And finally, she wanted to go live with her dad. And of course, I wanted to hold on to her. And the last time I picked her up from work at school, she had over 300 cuts on her legs. And so at that point, I'm like, if I don't allow her to go be with her dad, ultimately she's going to even accidentally kill herself. So I ended up having to let her go. And it was absolutely heartbreaking. And so now I'm just on my own, and, I just dug in my feet to my recovery, and I did AA, and I did all the things that I possibly could do. And I'll never forget, one thing I love to teach people is when your mind is just so powerful, and you can achieve anything you want, and you actually have control over your mind. A lot of people don't think that, but when I got out of rehab, one of the first things I had to do was go to a graduation party, and there was going to be a lot of drinking. And they teach you, do not be around wet faces, wet places. You can't go to bars. You're going to lose a lot of friends. Well, for me, when I isolate, that's a trigger for me. So I don't want to lose a lot of friends. I need people. I need my family. Well, all my family drinks. So I can't avoid graduation parties. This is something I did just to get myself to feel empowered enough to go to this graduation party with all of this alcohol and not feel like I was at risk with my sobriety. A friend was driving me there because, of course, I lost my license. So I said, pull over. I call 911, and I'm like, I need a cop here. I need to talk to him. It's not an emergency. Just want to share something with him. And so this cop shows up, and he's this big dude, right? Scary. And I just walked up to him. I said, thank you. I said, I just want to thank you, and I know it wasn't you personally, but you guys saved my life. I appreciate the fact that you gave me a drinking and driving. And I said, I know you probably don't get that appreciation from people like me, but I honestly believe you probably saved my life that night. And God knows how many other people you could have saved, because if you wouldn't have stopped me, I wouldn't have stopped myself. And I can't tell you how empowering that was for me to take that accountability for the first time in my life. I might just randomly call a cop, like, hey, thanks for throwing me in jail. But I learned so much by just doing that and taking that accountability. And I got to that graduation party and never once thought to drink, because I'm like, I finally felt like I was somebody, like I was something, and I could do something to be proud of myself. Like, that was really the first time in my life I ever felt that way.
Wow, that is an incredible part of your story. And that's something I don't think I haven't heard of a lot of people that would like, hey, I'm going to call the police and tell them thank you for my DUI. But it does make sense to me. Accountability is such an important thing for your life. You can't change here, I'll give you a good example. Feelings like shame and guilt and these worst moments of life, it's almost good that they rock you to your core so much, because it's the only thing that can help change your behavior. If you don't experience enough of a earth-shattering effect like shame can make you feel, or guilt or pain, or like seeing your children move away from you, those emotions are so powerful that it's the thing that can almost like fracture the broken identity that you have and allow something new to come through. Versus if they weren't as painful as they were, if you had never got caught by that cop, if you had never gone through those experiences, you might have just kept doing it because it was working out. Mm-hmm. You weren't running into enough accountability. And it's like the parallels throughout your story of the fact that since you were a child, and it's really fascinating to me, you've avoided being told what to do, or you've always wanted your freedom. But I don't know if anyone ever sat you down and said, like, what is right and what is wrong?
No, I don't know.
What is the path that is appropriate for you to walk, Jamie? Yes, you can do whatever you want to do, but these roads will lead to hell, and these roads will change your life. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if you have a little bit of a rebellious spirit like that, and no one ever maps out that, like, hey, you shouldn't do this because I said to do it. You should do it because it's better for your life. You should take this responsibility and accountability and say, man, but I see these other people doing this, and that looks like fun. You don't know what that looks like over 10 years. You don't know the pain and the relationships and the damage and the loss of their children that those people might experience, mm-hmm. that you want to avoid. So just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do something.
Right.
And it's like you are almost fighting the power so much of don't tell me what to do. And just because of that, it almost led you into a bunch of destruction that you didn't have to go through.
Right.
It's been an amazing thing sitting here and listening to your story unfold. So when hope left is when you said, okay, that was your rock bottom, I assume, from
It was
hearing your
my
story.
absolute rock bottom. Yep, between that and my DUI was my rock bottom.
So you hit a complete rock bottom in life, and you say, this needs to change. Mm-hmm. And then from there, you've probably seen a slow ascent upward. You've seen, oh my God, I can defeat alcohol. Like, I can defeat these behaviors. I can work to take accountability for things. I can have acceptance for the past. I can recreate who I am towards the future. Mm-hmm. I don't need to be chained to the decisions I made a half decade ago, forever, so that it makes me worse and worse and worse because I feel worse about all the things that have happened.
Right.
It sounds like you hit your rock bottom, and then there was probably a building process. Now, unfortunately in life, there can be multiple rock bottoms, and I know we're getting to another one. But so you hit your rock bottom, you start to see things through a different lens, but now, like, the kids are gone. Not to go on a tangent, but I'm someone that's never really struggled with alcohol. But when you were drinking, what was it about the repeated, because it takes money. Your family, your kids are definitely not happy with you during the process. You're definitely causing more damage than the good it might be doing. Like, all the signs are there that this is not the right answer, but what is it that actually kept you on drinking until you hit your rock bottom. Can you identify that at this point in your life? Like, why did you keep drinking until you hit rock bottom? Do you know?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't feel like my rock bottom was probably like, it could have been far worse, but that's when I chose, like, that's bottom enough for me. Like, I don't have to be homeless drinking out of a paper bag. I don't have to be doing all those things. Like, that was enough pain and enough shame that where I'm like, this is it. I mean, there are people with multiple DUIs, right?
Sense. Yeah, but I mean, like, when you were drinking, why were you stuck in that cycle?
Because it gave me self-confidence. It gave me self-worth. When I was drinking, they always say, what did you lose when you quit drinking? The ability to dance. Because I thought, I can dance, I can, make people laugh. I felt like somebody. Like I was the party. State. It was a carefree state. I didn't, I could check out of that very stressful life and the trauma and everything that I've never dealt with. I could check out.
That makes perfect sense. And I'm really glad you said that, because I try to tell people, I mentor a lot of people. I work with a lot of athletes. I work with a lot of court kids. And I tell them, like, you have to face the darkness of your life or it will consume you. You have to face the things that are haunting you. You have to look at the circumstances exactly as they are, not as you want them to be, not with a cherry on top, not from your perspective of, well, I don't want to accept this. You have to look at the exact circumstances of your life as clearly as possible, and then you have to start mapping out the best pathway forward with your morality, with your family, with your future, all in consideration. And that is brutally difficult to do.
Just brutally. Yeah, you have to heal it in order to, you have to feel it in order to heal from it, and especially early on in sobriety. So I always caution people, because any of your listeners that are listening, when somebody gets sober, it is so terrifying that I had went to my doctor and said, I drink too much, I need help. How can you help me? So he gave me Xanax and he gave me some other antidepressant of some sort. Well, I ended up calling the owner of the company that I worked for, and I'm like, I just need some time off. I'm going to go check myself in. I'm an alcoholic. And he's like, I didn't even realize you drank, because I was a very functioning alcoholic. I still got up and went to work every day. So when I hung up the phone with him, like, that made me accountable. Now I've told the owner of this company, I have to do this. Right? I went right to the store, and I'd already drank like 24 beers the night before. When I got up and went to go to work, I realized I'm still drunk. And so that's when I called and said, I need to go to rehab. And so I went right to the store at 9:30 in the morning, bought more beer. Long story short, I ended up in a psych ward that night because I kept taking the Xanax, and I didn't realize I was taking it. He told me to take it when I was like feeling anxiety. Well, all I could think of is I'm never going to be able to drink again. My whole life is going to change. And so as I'm drinking, I'm popping these Xanax without, remembering I'd already taken one. So my sister-in-law ended up picking me up and taking me to the hospital, because my mom called and said, I just got off the phone with Jamie. You need to get there. Something's wrong. She sounds like something's different. And I talked to my mom many, many, many times drunk. She just knew something was wrong. And my sister said, like, hey, you just took one of those. What are you taking? And I'm like, no, I haven't. I was in a complete blackout drunk. And that was my rock bottom. So when I went there, because I had just gotten this prescription, there was 9 left, I think. 9, whatever it was. I took 21 Xanax and drank 36 beers in a 24-hour period. And there's nothing, no logic of why I'm still here. But, I know why now. But at the time, I knew that God had different plans for me. I needed to shape up and get myself sober, and that's what I did. I dug head in. I was a sponsor. I went to many, many, many meetings, and I love the AA program, and it gave me a great foundation. But again, going back to I want to do my own rules. I want to break the rules. I want to, all of that. I still do that. People laugh at me because they know I'm a rule breaker. But I learned to channel that energy into a more positive way. Like I take old rules now and I teach my clients old rules, such as you have to, you're a child, you're to be seen, not heard. I had a client that she felt that she was taught that her entire life, and she was in a marriage where she was seen, not heard, And so finding all these rules that we live by that absolutely do not do us any good. You have to go to college to be successful. So if you never go to college, you grow up your whole life, you think you're not successful. Change that rule. You're happy, you're fulfilled. What does success actually look like to you, right? And then make that rule for yourself. And so I'm still a rule breaker, and everyone laughs at me because I'm like, I do what I want, but just in a healthy way. But yeah, so hope left then. Now I'm working, I'm sober. This is where my life went from victim, because Lord knows I could play the best victim. Everything was poor Jamie. Everything happened to Jamie. I would call my mom and be like, this, and that. Then I'd hang up and I'd call the next person that would listen, and I'd relive that story over and over and over again. I just lived in that negative mindset.
Were you getting something out of like telling the people the story and having them justify why you were in the state that you're in? Is that what you think
Pity.
kept the victim cycle going?
Pity, yeah. I mean, I got pity. They would always reinforce that I was doing the right thing when I wasn't doing the right thing.
Ooh, that's a big one right there.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, that's tough love. You
Yep.
don't tell people what they want to hear. You tell them the truth.
Yep.
And the truth cuts you. That's the bad thing about the truth, is it cuts you. And the real truth cuts through all the illusions. There's no such thing as my truth. That's what you want to be true.
Yeah.
There is the truth. And when you sugarcoat things for people and you allow behaviors that are destructive to them, you tell them, pity, pity, pity. You're a good person. You're making good person is not easy to do. You don't claim to be a good person. Your actions show if you're a good person. And it's something you have to work on if it doesn't come natural to you. And if you mislead people, you are cutting their legs out from under them. You might think you're giving them these good feelings. Like you said, pity does not help people. Pity destroys people.
It does. Because it keeps them living over and over, because you are giving them permission to act like a victim. And so before, I would call, like I said, and just live in that. Now I've learned to, when I'm going through something, I sit back and I process it. And I don't call anybody until I decide what I'm going to do with that information. Like, am I going to move forward? Because you call and you get everybody's opinion on what you should do about whatever you're going through. That's how I lost myself. I never made up my own mind. I never did what I wanted to do. I never learned how to do that. So now I sit back, and if I do call a friend, it's not to tell them what happened to me. It's to call and say, check me. I need to be checked. And when I know I need to be held accountable, and I've surrounded myself with really strong women, they have no problem checking me when I need it.
That's fascinating. I think that's another bit of wisdom that you're sharing right there is, I like that you said you sit and you process with it, and then you try to make a determination on what to do with the information or the situation, which is funny because that's what freedom is. The freedom that you've wanted your whole life is the ability to handle your own problems.
Yes.
And it's, if you go back to your story, you were always having to make your own way, but then you lost the trust in yourself to be able to make your own way.
Right.
It's like your story has so many parallels, and it's like as you came back to the source of what you were desiring, which is like the ability to trust yourself, to make decisions that you'll be proud of, to have freedom to do anything and yet choose to do the right thing. Like you've been able to see this, more and more clearly as you've gotten older, and that's probably why you're on a mission now to try to help other people, because you're like, I've lived through living the wrong way, having the wrong perspectives, being a victim, struggling with alcohol. And since you've gone through all these battles, that's almost what will, what's the right word, make you a proper ambassador for someone that is struggling with those things. It's like, because you actually battled through them.
Right.
So you mentioned one other thing. You've mentioned God and the Lord now multiple times. Did you grow up in a religious family?
No, my family was Catholic, and my mom would take us to church when we were younger, but after I got catechism, I don't know, like 10 years old, we never went back. But I just have a belief, to me, I believe there's a higher power. And I believe there's something bigger out there. That I'm very spiritual. I don't go to church on Sundays or anything like that, but I am very spiritual. And is that...
No, yeah, that makes sense. I found that religion seems to lay a pathway forward for a lot of people, and there can be bad parts of religion, just like there can be, bad parts of anything. But what religion attempts to do, at least from my understanding as I get older, is it kind of sets a moral guideline. It kind of sets, this is right and this is wrong. Like, it is good for children to grow up in a world where they are taught to respect their parents because the parents are much wiser and they have more wisdom. Your mom was trying to pour wisdom upon you. And if you grow up in the state of like, okay, if this is my parent and I have to listen.
Right.
A lot of kids that I see that grow up with no religion in the home, with parents that are detached, maybe more like your father, they experience that exact lost, no identity, this pain and struggle. But it sounds like religion was present to some degree, but not enforced to the spot where you really, had a map for like, okay, I should do this, shouldn't do that. You were given more freedom than maybe you could handle. That's a good way to say it. As a young kid, you were given more freedom than you could actually handle correctly.
Right.
We all want freedom. We all want the ability to make all of our own decisions and have no one tell us anything what to do. But the amount of responsibility and weight that comes with, it's like the less barriers to entry there are for pathways in your life, the more you're likely to walk down the wrong road.
Right.
And you have to be a strong enough person to open a door and go, oh, that's not a road I want to travel down. Versus most people go, oh, this is just the road I'm on. Let's see where it leads. And that's a slippery slope.
Sure.
So let's talk about, you got to the point where you would tell me before the podcast, this is one of the things that kind of rattled me that I wanted to hear this part of your story, because I've lost two people very close to me to suicide, was that your daughter, I don't know if it was suicide or if it was, a battle with drugs or an overdose or an accidental thing. I guess you'll probably never fully know the answer to that question. But you probably started to get your life back together, it sounds like. Because did that happen after you had gone and battled with your alcoholism?
Yeah. So I'm going on 11 years sobriety. May 20th, I'll have 11 years. But I did a lot of personal development. I went to be, to get certified as an empowerment coach, a life coach. And that program was 1.5 years long, literally changed my mindset. Talked about accountability.
What timeline is this?
This was 2016, so about 10 years ago. So this is when, shortly after Hope had moved out of the house and went to live with her dad. Now I'm just there by myself. I'm working. I decided to stop drinking. And I was at an AA retreat for women. And it was actually the retreat master was talking to me, and I was just sharing my story with her. And she said, have you ever thought about being a life coach? Well, back in 2016, life coaches were not a thing. You hear coach all the time now, but I'm like, literally, you keep talking about a light bulb moment. I could feel like this switch in me, and I'm like, oh my God, that's what I need to be. But I looked at her and I literally said, what the hell is a life coach? Never heard about it. All I know is that's what I needed to be. And I said, as an alcoholic, you have these addictive behaviors. And one of them for me is when I have my mindset on something, I will go all in on it. So I looked up for 3 weeks the best programs, because if I'm going to do something, I want to do it right. You could go and pay a couple $100 and get a certificate in 24 hours. I didn't want that. So I went through this very intense program, but it taught me, like I said, accountability. It taught me about inner critic. It talked to me about all blocking, getting in my own way in life. And I would pay that tuition, which was like $13,000, over and over again if I never make a dime off of coaching, because literally that took my sobriety to a whole new level. And the great thing about that is I learned that I could make my own rules and I could have that freedom, and I didn't have to put up with anybody in order to do that, and I didn't have to do it in a negative way. So I still am a very free person, and I'm very bold, but I have self-worth and I have self-confidence. And so, and thank God I had this training, because it was shortly after that I got a phone call. First, I got a phone call that my sister was diagnosed with cancer. 10 days later, she passed. In 4 months, I had lost my sister, my dad, and my stepdad. And my daughter called me from up north with her, she was living with her dad, and said she had been raped by her stepbrother, and she had been getting molested and sexually assaulted since she was 8 years old.
When she was living with you?
No, up north. She called me. She was living with her dad at the time.
No. I mean, when she was 8.
Yes. So this goes back to that. Oh, all of that acting out and cutting and all of these things. Like, she was being sexually assaulted, and I had no idea.
Not in your home when she was.
No. It was
I'm just
when she
trying
was
to
up
piece
north.
together.
So it was her stepbrother from her dad's side.
So he remarried.
He remarried. Yep.
And that woman's son.
Yes.
Was.
Yes. So that's, thank God for my sobriety, thank God for my mindset, because that really could have taken anybody down a path. But here's the thing, is that I was finally, for the first time, be able to show up for my daughter like a real mother and teach her about self-love and teach her about self-respect and do all the things a mother could do to help her heal from that as much as I could. And I would have never been able to do that had I not done the work.
Do you think you were kind of playing the role that your mother was with you? Like, you were kind of laying out the lessons and guidelines and helping her with perspective and getting her to see the world through like a different lens? Is that kind of the process that you were doing?
It was. In fact, when I picked up Hope and brought her back home and she moved back in with me, she said, "Mom, I know I'm going to be upset with you and yell, but I need structure. I need rules." And I looked at her, I'm like, "You need what?" Like, same thing. That's what I was craving from my dad, but I didn't know that's what I wanted. So
it's almost amazing that Hope was able to lay that out, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. She was a wonderful, and let me tell you, this is one thing I share with anybody when I have a platform to talk, especially when I talk about my daughter. She used to do like these seminars with me, right? So going back to that AA retreat, I did a whole full circle. So at that retreat, I was said, "Hey, you should be a life coach." Well, when I got certified, I went back and I was the retreat master, and I gave all the seminars for the weekend, and I brought my daughter with me, and we did our little show, and someone asked her, because we went through court, with her stepbrother, and he was getting ready to be sentenced. And someone asked her, she's 15, okay? Someone asked her, "Hope, like, are you going to feel like you got justice when he goes to prison?" And she said, "No." She says, "No court will ever give me justice. The only time I will ever get my real justice is when I heal from within." And I get goosebumps when I tell that, because hearing that, you might not understand how powerful that is, because when you go through something like traumatic, like she had gone through for 8 years, give the court the power, whether their decision is going to make you feel like you got justice or not. You have no control over that. None. They sentence them to 1 year less than what you think is fair. You go the rest of your life resentful. When you hold on to that and you put the responsibility and the accountability of getting better on yourself, no one can stop you. No matter what, no one can stop you. And for her to say that at 15 years old was so powerful. I mean, I remember looking at her going, "What?" Yeah, and I just think that's something to live by, is Hope's words.
So it's perfect this is a really good, before the podcast, you had said to me from 15 to 18, she had like a golden age. Like, yes. She had a really good, it sounds like it corresponds with this part of the story. So she has 3 really good years. You're turning your life around. Did you ever battle with imposter syndrome? Because it's like your life had hit you at all these rock bottoms. You've had your family fall apart. You've had your kids move out. You've had alcohol addiction problems. So many people are when they go through things like that, they completely discredit themselves from anything that could turn their life around. And you went the exact opposite. You said, "Oh, life coach, I'm going to be that." At the lowest point in your life, you
Right.
became a coach for others to put life together. did you battle with imposter syndrome? How did you overcome that? Like, if other people are looking to turn their lives around, one of the things that they need to do is they need to change their identity. Yeah. They need to look back within and say, I'm actually not just the mistakes I've made. I'm the person beyond that. I'm the potential that exists for what I could bring to the surface if I got myself together, if I had accountability, if I had better perspectives, if I had better environments. Did you ever have to battle with imposter syndrome, or was it just a very, like, right off the bat, you were able to connect and spearhead this campaign?
I think that, well, that's a great question. I was always a helper, right? But I was helping the wrong people. And when I learned, through my training and stuff, to focus on people that want to help themselves, first of all, makes your job a lot easier. But that's when you get real results. And that's one of my mottos, be real with yourself, you'll get real results. When people would come to me and say to me, I inspire them, or something I said completely changed their life, I had a very hard time believing that, because I am very humble, and I'm just me. I don't think there's anything special about me, and I don't know if that's what you're thinking of, imposter syndrome, but I get that a lot. I get people that will call me if they're struggling with alcohol. They call me if they're struggling with finding themselves after a toxic relationship. And I think it's just not just my training, but it is my life experience. And it is, like you said, it gives me credibility because I've lived these stories. I was that story. There's nothing you can tell me that I haven't done, or the pain that I haven't felt. So I think I struggle with it just because I'm just me. I feel that way. But I'm so grateful that I have the courage to tell my story so authentically that people can relate, and people know that they can be completely imperfect around me, because I love imperfect people. I love people that accept their flaws and, but want to continuously grow as a person. And so, yeah, I think it's difficult to accept that I have that power. Like, I've been on the news, I do all these things. Even Hunter is like, Mom, like, you are all over the place. And I don't look at it, I'm looking at it because I'm doing everything I can to try to make this world a better place, and trying to get this story out here to inspire either someone to get out of a toxic relationship, to know that you can be, like, right now, I own my own business. I'm finally married to this amazing, I can't even tell you, he is so phenomenal. He's that guy that I would have pushed away. I would have ruined him had I met him a day earlier, because he's one of the nice guys. And so I finally have that life that people think are impossible, that it's impossible when you're in active addiction or you're in an abusive relationship. I mean, it takes work. I put the work in, and now it's just, to me, it's coming to fruition. But that doesn't mean that hard things don't still happen, because going back to my daughter, so she had this golden, she was working, she got driver's training, graduated high school, all the things. And the very first relationship she gets into is with a man that wasn't honest, first of all, about his age. He said he was 24, she was 18. She was, started dating him. Later I found out he was 36. He introduced her to drugs. He abused her very badly. I had to move her out a few times. One time on her 18th birthday, actually, I got a call from Oakland County Sheriff that I needed to go get my daughter. She had been beaten so badly, and she was running down the road with half her clothes on, screaming he's going to kill me because he choked her so badly. And I can't tell you again what that does to a mother, because I look at my daughter, like, her whole life was trauma. Her whole life, she was raised by an alcoholic mother. She was sexually assaulted. She's going through what I did. She is going to find all of these toxic relationships. Well, he's in prison because I jumped in and helped her get justice and got her to rehab. And so she started doing really good. We were both advocates for a place called Haven, which is a resource center and shelter for survivors of domestic and sexual assault. And we went to their gala, and we stood up and were their spokesperson and shared our story. She was doing really good in rehab. She was living with my mom, and she ended up meeting.
Why was she living with your mom?
Well, because when she was drinking and acting with this man, some people call it tough love. I call it healthy love. I got to a point where I told her, I can't help you anymore. The only thing I can do is help you help yourself. If you want to go to rehab again, I'll get you there. When she was in rehab, I went and, saw her when it was visitation time. But she had lived with me prior to that and caused havoc, lots of havoc. And, police came. She tried to physically assault me. After that, I'm like, she wasn't welcome in my home to live, So when she got out of rehab, she went to go live with my mom. Well, she got back into drinking, and so told her that she got physical with my mother, which is almost 80 years old. So it's because she wanted to go move with this man and this woman that she had just met. And 3 weeks later, I get a call from this woman that my daughter was dead. I got that voicemail. And to be honest with you, we don't know. I mean, I know the matter of death. They found fentanyl in her system. We don't know if she committed suicide. We don't know if she was given something without her knowing. We do know that that day she had just posted she was very happy. She was in a relationship. She said, I've never been so happy in my life. And 3 hours later, this guy that she is dating now.
The 36-year-old or a different one?
This is a different one.
Okay.
This is the one that she just met 3 weeks ago when she moved out of my mom's. And it was his ex-wife that found her. How she got into the picture, I don't know. But, I tried to, get an investigation going. And the system is so broken. And they ended up just closing the case because there was no proof that someone gave her this fentanyl. So at this point, I went back to Hope's words. Mom, you want justice? You have to heal from within. And so I realized I was looking for outside sources to help me heal, to help me bring justice for my daughter. And she taught me better than that, So ever since then, I've just been really trying to find, I have a lot of fight in me right now. I want to fight the system. I want to fight how they treat people, first responders. They treated my daughter like she was just a drug addict, and it wasn't worth their time. And that was so horrible for me as a mother to hear the detective talk to me so poorly. And, it just, I want to work with first responders and teach them about compassion. And, hey, these people all have stories. They all have some sort of trauma. They didn't just wake up one day and become an addict, And you could be that one person that changes their life if you just believe in them, But I kind of went through, so it's been not even 2 years since I lost my daughter. And again, I was able to stay sober. And it's not just pure will. It was my mindset. I had that tough love, that healthy love for my daughter, but yet I didn't go down the road of, feeling guilty. Maybe if I just would have had her come home. Maybe if I would have done this, or the shouldas, the couldas. Unfortunately, it's just my daughter had a very traumatic childhood life, and she never got the opportunity to heal properly, to learn, to grow and overcome, the trauma that had happened to her life. And there's nothing I could have said or done to change that. So I force myself to not go down those paths. And when things get hard, like when the 1 year anniversary of her death was coming up, I kept reading all of these things like, when you lose a child, it's going to change who you are. And here's me going, I don't want it to change who I am. I loved my life. I'm so happy. I'm running this amazing all-women's Jeep group. We raised money in our community for Haven. We raised $37,000 last year at one event for them. We're really making an impact in life. I was, I had a job that I loved. I'm, doing my coaching. I don't want my life to change. But every book I read, every support group is going to change you. And here I am making my own rules again. I'm like, if it's going to change me, it's going to change me for the better. And it might take time for me to get to that point, but that's what I'm going to work toward. I'm not going to allow anything out of my control, and her death was out of my control me. I'm going to control how it's going to change me. But it takes a lot of self-reflection. It takes a lot of accountability, because I can tell you right now, James, if I wanted to go back to drinking and cry myself to sleep every night, nobody would fault me. Nobody. But I'm so grateful that I've had a life just long enough to know how wonderful life can be and how powerful I can be as a woman, and how using my story to be a warrior and to empower women versus as a victim. I'm so grateful I've had that opportunity, because I want this life. I don't want to go back to the victim life. It takes just as much energy to play victim or to play warrior, and I choose warrior.
That's a clip right there for sure. And like, change doesn't need to be a bad thing. Like, it will change you. You are a changed person from your daughter's death. Like, you are changed, but that doesn't mean it has to be a bad change. It can be a person that has an even deeper appreciation for life and for each moment because you've had things taken from you. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. You've really emphasized in several parts now the women empowerment, female, but you've also mentioned in the very beginning that you never had that like relationship with the father, with the structure and things. Do you think that empowerment should just be for everybody instead of for women? Like,
absolutely,
these lessons in accountability and putting yourself in order and having better perspectives, every child can use this. And I feel like sometimes in our society, we separate female empowerment, male empowerment, women are this, men are that. Accountability does not have a gender.
Right.
Responsibility does not have a gender. Leadership does not have a gender. These are principles and concepts that should be taught across society. Otherwise, when it's women's empowerment, that ostracizes the little boys that are seeking the right path in life. When this is a male thing, this is male leadership, whatever, motivation, whatever it is, you are ostracizing females. Do you see it as that you are just meant to help women, and why is that? Or is it just like you're meant to serve the world around you, to try to help people that go through struggles?
No, I absolutely am here to serve anyone that can resonate with my story and grow and want to change. I believe, even my husband, when I first met him, he needed to be empowered. His past relationships were long marriages where I asked him, what are your top 3 needs? I always have my coach hat on, right? I'm like, what are your top 3 needs in a relationship? Because I need to make sure that I can give you that. Right. And I don't mess around, right? I don't waste my time. I need to know. And it took him a month. He had no idea.
That's what I'm saying. That's a lost man. That's a man that hasn't had guidance. That's
a
man that hasn't had someone step into his life that was a mentor or leadership, say, hey, you matter. You matter. What you need matters.
Right, because if you don't know what you need in life, how do you expect anyone to meet your needs or help you grow when you don't even know? And when it took him that time, I'm like, wow, you are so busy taking care of everybody else's needs. You have no idea what your own needs are. So I think empowerment and could obviously go for anybody. And starting off at a young age would be ideal. And if I could turn things around, I would say, like, yeah, I wish I could have given that to my kids, but I don't regret my past. I'm not ashamed of my past. I'm actually proud, because I think everybody has a story. Everybody has some sort of trauma in their life. I'm no different, right? But what I'm most proud of is that I didn't succumb to it, and I didn't let my past continue on for my whole life. At some point, I was able to stop, and I'm grateful for the people that supported me to be able to help me make those choices to get sober and all of that. But accountability is where it's at. I'm the accountability queen.
100%.
100%. I survive to thrive. You don't just have to survive life events, you can thrive through them, and that's by accountability.
I think you're spot on. I think regardless, male or female, young and old, there's just principles like the truth, accountability, responsibility, right from wrong, good versus evil, self-reflection. Like, there's just so many things that the more you look into them, they might not be comfortable at the time, and they might show you your shortcomings. And if they do, that's good. It's right. Good. You want to face those things and try to say, how can I do a little better at this? What are the behaviors that I'm participating in that are really robbing me from the beauty of this life? Right. Because I can tell now that you love life now. You're happy about what you've created for yourself and of yourself. And it's like, if you can get people to feel that way at a younger age, they'll avoid so many of the trap doors of life. A lot of people that fall into trap doors, it's because they don't have a strong enough identity to stand on, that they're like, no, that's not for me. I'm not doing that. Right. I'm going to avoid those things. Oh, an abusive relationship? No, thank you. I'm going to walk away from this one. Oh, drugs? No, thank you. And it's like, we have to find a way as leaders to get children and families to be able to map these things out sooner so that they don't have to go through the hell to get to the other side of it. Because what you just said, I'm proud of my story. I'm proud of the pain that I went through. I'm proud of the worst moments of my life. Not proud. Like, if I had a time machine, I would go back and change some things. I would. I would change some things. And I don't know how that would change me today, but I would. But since I cannot, I do accept the fact that I had to live through every moment of my life, the best moments and the worst moments, to get to where I am today. Yeah. And I am proud of the man that I am today. And I do spend my time, it sounds like you, trying to serve the world around me and make the world a little bit of a better place. Because if you've been to hell and you've lived in your own mind and you've been in a tremendous amount of pain, you don't want to see others go through the same. And to pull people out of that experience really is an uplifting thing. And it's like, you think you're pouring into them, but really it's probably what's pouring into you and allowing you to keep moving forward. As you go like, wow, I can make a difference. Right. And hopefully we can, like you said, with young people or even young adults, and learning these things. Like, it took me until almost 40 years old to learn, the life that I deserve, to even know that it was within reach. I mean, 40 years old, that's a long time to wait to realize, When you look at society now, what do you think needs to be tuned up? Like, there needs to be more of this and less of this. Like, if you've already had children grow up in a home, you have been married a couple times, like you have so much world perspective now, and you've gone through leadership training, you've gone through all these different things, you've seen some of the worst parts of life and you've seen great parts of life. What do you think we need more of to raise healthier children, healthier societies, healthier psychologies? I mean, the opioid epidemic was slaughtering kids. You lost your daughter to fentanyl. Like, what is it that we need more of, that if we poured into families more of these magic ingredients, we would have a much better result for more people? What do you think it is? The first thing that comes to mind, or the thing that was screaming in my ear the whole time you're asking that, is healthier co-parenting. Because it's the majority anymore. People are raising children from broken homes, 2 different households, and we don't teach enough about what the impact is if you guys are bickering and fighting, if you guys are talking poorly about the other parent. We don't talk about enough what that actually does to your child. And we need to normalize that, that they can remain close as friends or co-parents for their children. And we need to, for instance,
if I'm in a relationship and my ex-husband's in a relationship, let's the four of us go do things. Let them see that this is okay. A lot of people think that's weird, that's not normal. Let's start normalizing that, because I think, as coming from a broken home, the difference between my mom and dad, it really negatively impacted me, because
there wasn't a standard.
There wasn't a standard.
I didn't know across the board. You didn't have something to trust.
And even when you do have like the mom that wanted to teach me self-love and structure and rules, I pushed it away because
you could run from it.
I could
can
run
just go
from
over
it.
Here and I don't have to do any of
I
that.
got the easy life, right? I don't have to do all that stuff or have any accountability.
So you would say the ideal is actually the nuclear family then would just be having a mother and father in the home that learn to work through their own difficulties and be there for each other and learn each other's needs like you're doing now with your husband.
Yes.
And then to raise children. But if that fails and there's the broken family and you're going to have multiple households, we need congruency of like, hey, these are the standards that we believe in for our children, that we know that holding them to these standards, holding them accountable, teaching them about life, teaching them about suffering and pain and the good and the bad. If we stay on the same and we work as a team, it's going to produce much better results.
Right. And the other thing, too, is learning to, life is so busy. We all live on the surface level day to day. When is the last time you sit down with your spouse and you go on a deeper level? Like asking questions like, what are your needs? Am I meeting your needs? Here's what my needs are. And talking about not what's for dinner, what appointments you have. And the next thing you know, years have gone by, and then everyone looks at each other and just like, I fell out of love. You hear that so much. Well, no wonder why you don't even know who each other are anymore. And just learning to live more authentically and on that deeper level, having those deeper conversations, falling in love over and over again, because you ask, like, what are your core values? You know, I teach that in my coaching. I've had hundreds of clients over the years, and never once have I said, have you ever defined what your core values are? No one, not one person is, well, I know what I value. Yeah, but do you know what you really value? Do you know what is at your core? What makes you tick? What makes what drives you? And it shows up in everything in your life, like communication. So you and your wife might both say, I value family. But the man's out working, right? Overtime, he's traveling because he's bringing in all this money. Wife is upset because she values family. I want my husband home and have dinner with me and the kids. She also, because she also values family. But so defining what that is, how that shows up, and the man's like, well, for me to feel like I'm providing for my family, this is what I need. Okay, well, for me to feel like my husband is part of this family, this is what I need. How do we compromise? Instead, all they do is fight over, he's never there for dinner. Well, I'm sorry, you're not out busting your butt 80 hours a week, and same old conversation. So yeah, to change, I think the world needs more accountability, being authentic, and living on a deeper level, not on the surface.
Yeah, communication, level. Right? Like you have to communicate, even if it's uncomfortable. You have to, otherwise you're going to, like you said, you mentioned multiple times throughout your stories, you're like, I told myself these lies that I didn't accept to be lies until much later. And it's because you had a story running. You could justify things. You could, it's because of this. And it's like that authentic communication, sitting down and meeting someone else where they are and saying, listen, that might be the case for you. Right. But these are the needs that need to be met on my side. And if you can show up like that for each other, as if you do it in a company. If you work for a company and your boss sits down and is like, hey, we need to figure this out, you work with them. It's like you got to go home into your families and you got to have that communication. You got to lay out exactly what it is you're working towards, because it keeps your lines parallel. Otherwise, your lines start to diverge, and if you get enough space in between, it's just like, this isn't working.
Right.
Well, duh, because it's been falling apart for a long period of time. That makes a lot of sense, and you've probably seen that in so many aspects of your coaching and in working with other people. Because, man, I see it all the time. I work with hundreds of young kids and dreamers and stuff here, and the amount of like genuine encouragement most of these people get in their lives is like non-existent. And I sit down and I go like, what do you want? Well, I don't really know. Well, okay, what are your plans? Well, I don't really know. And then like you can see on the other side of the room, I'm like, we're going to make a vision board. Have you ever made a personal financial statement? We're going to map out your finances. What are the, next 3 years going to look like if they go ideally for you? What character development are you working on? What are the habits that you have that are self-destructive, that if you don't get rid of, they're going to rip you apart? We're not doing this enough. And it's like we're educating kids in school for all these random topics. Let's list the former presidents. Let's do X, Y, and Z. But we're not showing a kid how to map out their psychology, how to figure out what their core values are, how to work on communication, how to step outside of their comfort zone, how to stretch and grow through a world that is going to hurt you, how to process pain, how to level up from challenge. And it's like, we got to get back to these basics. And the more that we do that, the more that people will have a sense of pride in themselves. And if you're proud of who you are and you're willing to struggle and you're willing to go through pain and you're willing to continue on this path, it's like life is pretty amazing. You might not believe that when you're a kid. You might not believe that when you're suffering. You might not believe that when you're battling with drugs or all kind of other things. But if you can overcome it, you're someone that's living proof now. The mountain subsides at some point.
Right.
And like every day probably is uphill for the rest of your life because you still have responsibility to take on. You still have people that depend on you. You have to show up for yourself and the world. But at a certain point, the journey actually turns into like, I'm happy to walk the journey.
Right.
I'm proud to get up each day and take on this responsibility and this and move forward into the future. And it's like if we can get people to that psychological state, life is an adventure, and it's meant to be that. And it always has been that. It's just you can't let the pain drop you to a point where you say, like, it's not worth fighting for.
Right.
It's not worth going on. And so I think you've really laid out so many incredible aspects in this podcast of how life taught you very hard lessons. You had a rebellious spirit from early age.
I still do, James, but I
do.
Right.
Anyone that knows me, I am the biggest rule breaker. Like, I do not care what is written down on paper at all. Right. I only follow the rule because I understand and accept the rule. The only reason I do things is because it aligns with what I believe to be right and true.
Yeah.
I don't care what you say, and I don't care what anyone else says. And this is probably a weird comment, but like I don't even care what the law says. I care about what's right.
Right.
Okay? But that can be channeled effectively.
Yes.
But you have to have good morality. You have to be a good person. You have to get the truth, to match your ideologies. Otherwise, you can create all kinds of stories in your head.
Right.
Well, I'm fine to do this because of X. It's like, no. You can do that, but you're not considering the collateral damage that's being caused right now. And when that comes back into your perspective, you might go, I should probably change my behavior a little bit.
Right.
So it's like, that's a good spirit. It's a good spirit to be able to be someone that's an innovator, that's a creator, that wants to stretch things. But you have to match that with good self-worth, with service to the world, to your family, to a community, to the people that you coach, something. It's not a bad thing to be a rule breaker. Honestly, most of my closest friends are kind of wired that way because that's why they're living outside of the norms in life. They want to create incredible things. They don't want to just go to an office, punch a time card, get a basic paycheck. Those are the obedient people. And that might avoid some difficulties in life. But to me, if you're a rule breaker and you really put your life together, you're going to find way more fulfillment because you're really going to live on your terms.
Right.
You're not going to fall into a life where you let enough of your dreams die and you're getting by okay and you're comfortable and you ride that off into the sunset. Rule breakers don't want that.
No.
They want to shine. They
Right.
want to be bright in what they do. They want to make an impact. They want to make a difference. You want to realize that you have a certain uniqueness about you because of the way that you're living, that you matter. Your cup says difference maker.
Yes.
That is an outward statement to the world that I am unique and I matter. The Jeep that you pulled up in, it stands out. It's not like 99% of vehicles on the road. You are making a profound statement that I can live this world on my terms.
Right.
Now, the beauty is you've always been able to do that. And if we tell kids, you are allowed to make any decision any second of your life. Parents are only trying to get you to realize there are good and bad decisions. And you will suffer the consequence of every action that you take. So if you love me, trust me, care about me, etc., just know that I'm actually fighting for you, not against you.
Right.
So the way I'd like to wrap up this podcast, we did an hour and a half so far, by the way.
Wow.
We shot a full-length feature film. The way I'd like to wrap up the podcast is project the next 3-5 years. Like, I'm sure you're a person that looks ahead. Like, you've turned your life around. You have a business. You have a husband by your side that you love. You are possibly getting into some of the best years of your life. What do you see as what's next for you? How do you keep yourself growing? How do you serve the world to the maximum of your capabilities? Like, just kind of leave the podcast with, what are we focused on in the next 3 to 5 years? If Hunter was sitting here today and say, Mom, what do the next 3 years look like? What's the answer to that?
Well, my goal is to write a book. And I feel that, our story, the story that my children have been through, the story I've been through, it needs to be out there. And so in 3 to 5 years, I better have that book written. Hunter will be knocking down my door and a lot of other people. But that, and then just working with, like right now, if I see myself, I have that little self-doubt that I want to work with lawyers and police officers and detectives and bring in bringing that compassion back. And, in 3 to 5 years, I'm hoping I'm making some change into that and holding them accountable for their lack of compassion. And, you always say that they're trying to help with the drug problem, the human trafficking, and all of that. But are they? Because when I'm sat down with detectives and everything, when my daughter was going through self-harming and doing all that, I called 60 different places one time throughout the United States to try to get her into a facility. Not one.
Why wouldn't they put her into a facility?
They just didn't have the availability, or they weren't equipped for her. It was one excuse after another. And so you see everything on this media that they're trying to do all of these things. But when, to imagine being in active addiction trying to get help. I was so frustrated over 2 days trying to find somewhere to put my daughter. So making an impact.
And so what kind of, just because I've never battled with anything else, what were you looking for your daughter? Because you're trying to change your life and you're trying to change her trajectory. What were you trying to put her into that you thought was going to change her?
Well, at the time, just rehab. Like
rehab. Okay.
Inpatient, long-term rehab, not 2 weeks and you're out, right?
So you're in there, the substance is taken from you, and you are forced to live by this. Because rehab affected you positively. You had already gone through it and realized that it helped you turn your life around. So you were just trying to get her to go through the same circumstances then?
Yeah, I wanted to try to get her, not only sober, but you have to be sober to get a healthy mindset. So looking for an inpatient place that would not just teach her to stay sober, but also life skills and mindset and different coping skills, over a length of time. In 2 weeks, I was only in rehab for 2 weeks, but I'm not the norm. I, knock on wood, have never relapsed. That is very unusual, but.
What is like the relapse rate for people that go to rehab? Do you have any idea? What are the statistics on that?
I don't know the exact statistics, but more people relapse than they do staying sober.
And you're saying, and there's not even enough clinics. The question, though, is there not enough clinics, or is the treatment really not effective enough, and we need to find a better way in our society to help people that are struggling with addiction? Because like if their failure rate is that high, it's like,
right.
Okay, you get her in, but unless you're the unique person that is able to really go, okay, cold turkey, I'm done with that now, no more of that.
I thought it even like AA, I told you I did that program for a while, and I will never talk bad about the program. It really works, and it's really the foundation for certain people. But they had rules that
So how many parallels in your story have it come back to rules?
Right, that I just stay away from wet faces, wet places. Well, that means you're telling me that I have to stay away from my family. I can't go to weddings. I can't go to, graduation parties. I can't go on a cruise because there's alcohol everywhere.
Yeah, to me, that seems ludicrous. I'm sorry to say it. That seems, I don't mean this to be offensive to AA, because I'm sure it's served countless people's lives.
Yes.
But to me, that seems so dumb, because you need to get the person to the strength and discipline.
That's it.
To be right next to it. To be sitting next to someone that wants to drink and say, I remember when I made those choices and how it affected my life. And that's not me anymore. And I don't want it. Just removing the circumstances, the desire and demon is still there in the brain. And if they get into enough circumstance again, or the day they have a bad enough time, they're going to drive to the store and say, I don't care. And you need to get over the hurdle to identify differently, like you did, where you say, that's not me anymore. Right. It's almost like I think the exact opposite. You should put people through exposure therapy,
Yes.
putting them in the circumstance. I mean, I think clinical psychiatrists have known for like 5 decades that the best type of mental rehabilitation is exposure therapy. You want to put people in circumstances that have previously crippled them, broken them, where the fear is deeply rooted that there's no way I can survive that circumstance, and allow them to see that not only can they survive it, they can thrive, and they can choose a different destination.
Right. That was my whole thing. I'm like, I'm the one who decided to quit drinking. I'm the one who can't handle it. Why should everyone else around me quit drinking? Also, I still wanted to have fun. So I'll take, one time the girls were doing shots, and I took like my Pepsi, or I think it was even espresso shots, and I'm doing shots with them. Who cares what's in my cup, right? So I can play along, and I can go on cruises, and I can dance and have all the fun. It doesn't matter what's in my cup. And, and I do make sure I know the next morning where they're hanging their head, they're not feeling good. I'm like, at least I don't have to deal with that anymore, but yeah, that, and then like going to meetings. When you go to an AA meeting, you sit around in a circle, you talk about the difficulty of dealing with it, or maybe you got triggered that week, but there's no crosstalk. You can talk after the meeting. So to me, it just kind of looked like, especially after I went through my training for coaching, everyone's sitting in a circle talking about how alcohol has negatively impacted their life, and then you're gone. Where's the solutions? Where's the positivity from this? Where's the strength? But they say you have to teach the newcomers. Well, so there's like, I have my own rules, and so I support AA, and I think it's a great foundation. It didn't work for me because I want to be around drinking and handle it. I want to, you know what I mean? I don't want to isolate. I want to go to weddings. I want to live life. I don't want things like that to change me as a person.
I mean, that just makes sense, though. Like,
Right.
what, you're going to lessen your life, and to me, that's, you're going to live in fear. You're going to say, I cannot change my behavior, and I cannot control myself. I don't have the self-control, so I need to take all of these things out of my life and live a more dim, lesser life,
Right.
because I'm not strong enough. That's just not reality. You can change your self-control. It might be incredibly difficult. You can change your discipline. You can get to a point where you look at that and say, that is a poison that plagues countless people's lives, and I will no longer fall victim to it. You're in that state. You're living proof of that.
Right. Being an alcoholic was a chapter in my life. And if I have to relive it day after day after day, I would allow it to define me. And if that defined me, being an empowerment coach and changing lives and doing community work wouldn't be able to define me, because I'm so focused on recovering alcoholic. So I let that be a chapter, but not my destination.
That was really powerful. You have to close that chapter. You know what? That's what it is when you say, like, no wet faces, no wet places, you're keeping that chapter that they're an alcoholic open forever.
Right.
Close the fucking chapter.
In a way, it was like alcohol still controlling me.
It is.
If I can't do certain things and be around I'm allowing alcohol to control me.
100%.
We know that Jamie can't be controlled anymore.
No, 100%. That really makes a lot of sense. So I believe that we need to find better forms of rehabilitation for people. We need to find different structures for helping people put their lives back together and reestablishing better identities, like you just said, like realizing like you're an evolving process over time.
Right.
You are not, if you were an alcoholic at one point, that doesn't mean that's your story forever. That doesn't mean you have a genetic trait that, sorry, you're doomed to be an alcoholic forever. If you talk to people in that language, it is crippling to them to tell them they have to avoid something because they are not in control of themselves. They can't steer their future. They're not the captain of their own ship. You are disempowering them to a degree.
You're giving them their next excuse to relapse. That's all you're doing.
Exactly. So I think the world definitely needs a lot of change. It sounds like you are going to be working really hard to try to use the life lessons you've gathered over the course of your life to show people a better way. I love that you're focused on, with first responders and stuff. I understand how they could get desensitized. I understand how they probably see so many drug addicts and so many people that are, throwing their lives away, and they just get to the point like, man, like Imagine if you're the cop and you have to show up on people's worst day all the time, constantly seeing the most horrific, depressing parts of life. You're looking at bodies. You have to call a coroner. You have to see somebody blue in front of their mother. Like maybe that's just a compartmentalization that has to happen because you're like, this is just, and you're going to go back home and you have to try to raise your children and live a normal life when you're experiencing all that. But either way, like you said, that person has a full story. That is a child that has got led astray, that has left the path, that is struggling with a tremendous amount of pain, that is either that was their last moments or is begging for help. And like you said, a little bit of light might be the one person. And that's a fucking weight for that. Imagine, so you're saying to a police officer, you need to be the light every time you show up for someone else. That's a serious burden to carry. Yeah. And it's like if you choose to be in that profession, you might have an unbelievable amount of burden to carry. But if you actually want to be a difference maker, you're going to have to try to shoulder that burden.
Yes.
And maybe you'll only help 1 out of 1,000 people, and 999 might hate you. They might say, I can't believe you're arresting me, or this is happening. The DUI that you're thankful for, there's 1,000 other people that say that police officer is a piece of shit and they ruined my life. And if they would have just let me off or let me go, it's like, so they have a burden.
And people like me need to reach out to them more. Like I've reached out to that police officer. I found him like 8 years into my sobriety. I've sent the judge a letter too, and thanking them and then reminding them, do it for people like me.
And you're the exception to the rule, though, in that case. I'm telling you right now. Most people, the victim card is too appealing.
Mm-hmm. It's so easy.
It's too easy to say, I'm a victim of life circumstances. But for anyone that watched this as episode, like those words probably piss you off. Mm-hmm. I promise you, if you're a victim, it is not hurting me, and it's not hurting the people around you. It's hurting you.
No one sent you to jail. No one gave you a ticket. You did that. If you didn't commit the crime, it's ownership.
Accountability.
Yes.
So I think it's been an amazing podcast today. I think there's so many good parts that people will enjoy thoroughly from your story and your perspectives. And I think just having these conversations in general without aim. Like I didn't have a single question written down in advance. We talked for 5 or 10 minutes, then we start. The idea is being able to be vulnerable and talk about life and share perspective and search for truth and try to shape ourselves in the future in a better direction so that there's less cases of travesty.
Right.
So thank you so much for joining me today, Jamie. I hope you enjoyed sitting and podcasting with me.
It's been great. Thank you so much.
And hopefully this message reaches a lot of people.
Thank you.